The bullet that killed Bryce Callahan entered through his chest at 847 feet per second. Kira Thornton felt the impact before she heard the shot. The wet thud of metal meeting flesh. The sudden weight of her spotter's body collapsing against her shoulder. Then the crack of the rifle echoing off the Hindu Kush mountains, bouncing between peaks like a cruel joke that refused to end. 5 rounds. That's what the enemy sniper put into Bryce before Kira could return fire. 5 rounds in the span of 3 heartbeats while she was adjusting her scope, while she was following protocol, while she was being a good soldier. She dragged him behind a boulder, her hands already slick with blood that steamed in the frozen mountain air. The ambush had come from nowhere. 6 Taliban fighters emerging from spider holes they'd walked right past, positions so well concealed that even her trained eyes had missed them. Kira killed all 6 in 11 seconds. Her rifle barked 6 times and 6 men dropped. But those 11 seconds cost her everything. Bryce lay in her arms now, his tactical vest shredded his breath, coming in wet, rattling gasps that painted the snow red with each exhale. His eyes found hers, and in them, she saw something that would haunt her for years to come. Not fear, not pain, disappointment. "I called it," he whispered, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. "I called the route, said it was wrong." He had. Kira remembered now with terrible clarity. 3 hours ago, Bryce had studied the terrain and shaken his head. Something felt off, he'd said. The approach was too clean, the sightlines too convenient. But command had overruled his assessment. The intelligence was solid, they'd said. The route was secure. She'd followed orders instead of trusting her spotter. "Kira." Bryce's hand found hers, his grip weakening with each passing second. "Don't be silent anymore. When you know something's wrong, don't let them turn you into a real ghost." His fingers went slack. The light left his eyes. Kira screamed into her radio, calling for extraction, calling for support, calling for anyone who could hear her. But the frequencies were jammed, filled with static that sounded like laughter, and she was alone on a frozen mountain with her dead friend and the bodies of the men who killed him. She held Bryce until his blood froze against her uniform. She held him until the extraction team found her 6 hours later, still cradling his body, still whispering apologies he could no longer hear. 2 years later, Staff Sergeant Kira Thornton had become exactly what Bryce warned her against: a ghost. She lay motionless in a shallow depression on the mountainside, her ghillie suit blending so perfectly with the Afghan terrain that a mountain goat had walked within 3 feet of her face an hour ago without noticing she existed. 14 hours she'd been in this position. 14 hours of controlled breathing, of minimal movement, of watching through her scope, while her muscles screamed and her bladder protested and her mind wandered through memories she'd rather forget. This was her life now. The Ghost Site program. Solo reconnaissance operations so classified that her own family thought she worked a desk job at the Pentagon. No team, no spotter, no one close enough to lose. Her mission parameters were explicit, printed in her mind like scripture. Observe, report, do not engage, do not exist. The valley below held secrets the Department of Defense wanted badly. A compound that satellite imagery suggested might be a training facility for foreign fighters. Weapons caches that could supply insurgents for years. Communications equipment that might connect to networks stretching across 3 continents. Kira had spent 6 months mapping every inch of this terrain. She knew the patrol patterns, the guard rotations, the hidden trails that only locals used. She knew which boulders provided cover and which ones were death traps. She knew the wind patterns that shifted with the sun's movement across the sky. What she hadn't known until 17 minutes ago was that someone had set a trap. Through her scope, she watched SEAL Team 7 advance into the valley in a staggered tactical formation. 12 men moving with the confident precision of elite operators who'd done this 100 times before. Their intelligence briefing had promised light resistance, 10 to 15 fighters maybe, a quick extraction of high-value materials, and back to base for beer and debriefing. Kira counted the enemy positions again, hoping she'd made a mistake. She hadn't. 63 fighters, maybe more in the caves she couldn't see into. They held the high ground on 3 ridgelines, forming a kill box that the SEALs were walking directly into. Their weapons were Russian. Their discipline was military. Their patience was terrifying. They weren't Taliban, not regular forces, anyway. These men moved like they'd been trained by professionals, state-sponsored professionals, and they were waiting. Kira's finger hovered over her radio. Ghost Site Protocol demanded she report the threat and maintain position. Do not engage. Do not compromise the operation. Let other assets handle the tactical situation while she preserved her cover for the larger intelligence mission. But there were no other assets. The nearest quick reaction force was 40 minutes out. Air support was grounded due to weather moving in from the north. The SEALs' radio frequencies were being jammed. They had no idea what they were walking into. 12 men, fathers, brothers, sons. 12 men who'd signed up to serve their country and trusted that their intelligence would keep them alive. 12 men who were going to die in the next 3 minutes unless someone did something. Kira watched the enemy commander raise his hand preparing to signal the ambush. He was a tall man in tactical gear that looked American-made, directing his fighters with hand signals that seemed almost familiar. 90 seconds, maybe less. The SEALs reached the center of the kill box. The commander's hand began to drop. Kira pressed her radio. Ghost Site Command, this is Overwatch 7. 12 friendlies walking into prepared ambush. 60-plus hostiles requesting authorization to... The response was immediate and cold. Negative Overwatch 7, maintain position. Do not engage, you do not exist. Command, they are going to be slaughtered. There's no support coming. I'm their only... You are not support. You are reconnaissance. Your mission is... Kira watched the commander's hand reach the bottom of its arc. And she remembered Bryce. She remembered holding him while he bled out. Remembered his last words. Remembered the promises she'd made over his frozen body. Never again would she stay silent when she knew the truth. Never again would she follow orders into someone else's grave. Her finger moved from the radio to the trigger of her M110 SAS. The rifle was an extension of her body, now tuned to her preferences, zeroed to her eye, modified with a suppressor that would mask her muzzle flash, but not eliminate it entirely. One shot and her career was over. One shot and Ghost Site would disavow her existence. One shot and everything she'd built in the past 2 years would burn. One shot and 12 men might live. She exhaled, halfway held. It felt her heartbeat slow to the rhythm she'd trained for a decade to achieve. The scope's reticle settled on the enemy commander's head. 800 meters. Crosswind 7 miles per hour from the northeast. Elevation differential, positive 43 meters. Temperature, 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity low. She'd made harder shots before. The trigger broke clean. Captain Garrett Shaw had been running combat operations for 15 years. He'd led missions on 4 continents. He'd lost men and saved men and learned to live with the difference. Nothing surprised him anymore. Until his point man's head exploded 12 inches from his face. No, wait, not his point man. The enemy fighter who'd been rising from a spider hole with an RPG aimed at Shaw's chest. The man who'd been invisible until the exact moment he became visible, who'd had Shaw dead to rights, who'd been half a trigger pull away from turning the SEAL team leader into a memory. That man's head snapped backward, a pink mist hanging in the mountain air, and his body crumpled before Shaw's brain could process what was happening. The crack of the rifle reached them a heartbeat later, echoing off the valley walls like thunder. Then everything went to hell. The ambush sprung anyway, dozens of fighters opening up from positions on 3 ridgelines. The valley became a hurricane of lead rounds snapping past Shaw's head, sparking off rocks, churning the dirt into clouds that obscured everything. Contact, all sides. They're above us. RPG left. Shaw threw himself behind a boulder that suddenly felt very small. His team was scattering, finding cover, returning fire, but they were pinned down and outgunned, and they all knew it. This was a kill box. Textbook execution. Someone had known they were coming. But something else was happening too. A machine gunner who'd been shredding their cover position dropped his weapon, going silent. Then the spotter on the eastern ridge, the one calling corrections for the mortar team, Shaw could hear setting up. Then another fighter and another, each one dropping from a single shot that came from somewhere above, somewhere impossible, somewhere Shaw couldn't identify. Who's shooting? Lieutenant Hale pressed against the rock beside him, blood running from a cut above his eye. Is that air support? Negative. Shaw scanned the ridgelines, trying to trace the incoming fire. Too precise. That's a shooter. One shooter taking those shots, Shaw watched another enemy fighter drop. saw the man's body jerk sideways from the impact before the sound of the shot reached them. The angle was wrong for any position on the surrounding ridges. It was coming from higher, much higher, from a mountainside that should have been empty. "Someone's up there," he said. "Someone's helping us." Kira worked her rifle like a surgical instrument. 3 shots from position Alpha. Displacement to position Bravo. 4 more shots. Displacement again. The enemy couldn't track her because she never stayed still. She flowed across the mountainside like water, finding its path downhill using terrain she'd memorized over 6 months of patient observation. Her ghillie suit snagged on rocks, and her muscles screamed from 14 hours of motionless observation, followed by explosive movement. But her hands remained steady. Her hands were always steady. She prioritized targets the way Hawk Grayson had taught her during the 3 years of hell he'd called training. Leaders first. Heavy weapons second. Anyone coordinating group movement third. The enemy commander was already dead. The machine gunners were dying. The mortar team never got a round off. With each shot, she bought the SEALs another few seconds of life. But she was burning through ammunition. 40 rounds when she'd started, now 32, then 27. Each shot was a life, but each shot was also a finite resource she couldn't replace. The enemy was adapting. They'd stopped exposing themselves unnecessarily, started using better cover, begun to figure out the general direction of her fire. She couldn't maintain this forever. Through her scope, she watched the SEALs begin to reorganize. The initial chaos was giving way to trained discipline. They were redistributing ammunition, tightening their perimeter, preparing to fight their way out. Good, they were professionals. But the enemy had professionals too. Kira saw the shift in their tactics before it fully developed. Half the fighters maintained pressure on the valley floor, keeping the SEALs pinned. The other half began moving in a new pattern, breaking off from the main force, beginning a cautious advance up the mountainside. Toward her. They'd figured out her general position. Not exactly, but close enough, and they were sending 30 fighters to find her. Kira keyed her radio to the emergency frequency, knowing it would blow her ghost sight cover completely, knowing her career was already over anyway. "Hammer 1, this is Overwatch. You have approximately 8 minutes before they get mortars operational on your position. Recommend immediate displacement northeast bearing 045 200 meters. There's a wadi that'll provide hard cover." Silence on the radio, then a voice she didn't recognize, tight with controlled tension. "Overwatch, identify yourself." "Negative. Move now or you're dead." She didn't wait for a response. Her scope swept back to the valley floor, finding the enemy radio operator crouched behind a boulder. The man was speaking rapidly into his handset, probably calling for the reinforcements and heavy weapons that would end this fight decisively. Distance, 820 meters. Elevated position. Wind pushing her shot pattern 3 inches right at this range. She compensated, found the still point between breaths where the body becomes stone. The trigger broke. The radio operator's call for artillery died with him. 23 rounds remaining. Garrett Shaw heard the woman's voice on his radio and made a decision that went against every protocol he had ever been taught. He trusted her. Maybe it was the precision of her shooting, the impossible accuracy that had already saved half his team. Maybe it was the calm certainty in her voice, the voice of someone who knew exactly what was happening and exactly what needed to happen next. Maybe it was just instinct, the gut feeling that separated good operators from dead ones. "All elements displaced northeast on my mark," he commanded. "Bearing 045 200 meters. Move fast and stay low." "Sir," Hale looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "We don't know who that is. We don't know. I know she's killed 15 of them in the last 3 minutes. That's enough for me." Shaw checked his magazine, half empty. "Move on 3. 1, 2. They moved. The SEALs burst from cover in a coordinated rush, laying down suppressive fire as they displaced to the northeast. The enemy, focused on their mysterious sniper, was caught off guard by the sudden movement. By the time they reacted, Shaw's team had reached the wadi the woman had promised. It was perfect. Steep walls of rock that provided cover from 3 directions. A narrow entrance that could be defended. Enough depth to organize a proper defensive position. Whoever was up on that mountain knew this terrain better than the people who lived here. Shaw pressed against the wadi wall, breathing hard. Around him, his men were doing the same, checking ammunition, treating minor wounds, processing the fact that they were still alive when they should have been dead. "Radio check," he called. "Sound off." All 12 voices answered. All 12. They'd walked into a prepared ambush with 60-plus hostiles and come out without a single KIA. That didn't happen. That wasn't possible. Unless someone on that mountain had made it possible. Shaw keyed his radio. Overwatch, this is Hammer 1. We're at the Wadi. What's your situation? Static. Then her voice calm, but with an edge that hadn't been there before. I have approximately 30 hostiles advancing on my position. I'm displacing now, but they're learning my patterns. They'll have me pinned within 4 to 5 minutes. Can you get to an alternate position? A pause. Negative. If I abandon this position, I lose Overwatch on the valley, and they'll redirect to you with full force. She was staying to protect them. This woman they'd never met, whose face they'd never seen, was sacrificing her tactical advantage to keep them alive. Shaw made another decision. First squad, you're with me. We're going up. Sir, Hale stepped forward. That's a suicide mission. We don't even know where she is exactly, and we've got 30 hostiles between us, and she saved our lives 6 times in the last 10 minutes, Lieutenant. We're not leaving her to die. Shaw checked his rifle. Second squad stays here. Hold this position. We'll be back. With what sort of miracle? Shaw smiled grimly. Something like that. Kira saw them coming. Through her scope, she watched 6 SEALs break from the wadi and begin climbing the mountainside toward her position. They moved fast, using speed instead of stealth, trusting her to keep the enemy's heads down. Insane. Completely insane. They were risking their lives for someone they'd never met, someone who, by all rights, shouldn't even exist. And they were doing it anyway. No, she whispered. Stay down. Don't be heroes. But they kept climbing, and she had a choice to make. Abandon her position, disappear into the mountains, preserve what was left of her cover and her career. Or stay and protect men who were risking everything to reach her. Bryce's voice echoed in her memory. Don't be silent anymore. Kira adjusted her scope and went back to work. The enemy fighters advancing on her position were moving in fire teams, covering each other's movement, using terrain intelligently. Professional, well-trained, dangerous. She took the lead climber into the first team. 800 meters steep angle wind gusting unpredictably. The shot was clean. He dropped. His partner dove for cover, and she put the next round through the gap between rocks, catching him in the shoulder. Not fatal, but he wouldn't be climbing any mountains today. 21 rounds. The SEALs were making progress. The big one in front, the one who moved like he'd been born in mountains, was choosing routes that provided cover while maintaining upward momentum. Smart. Experienced. 3 more enemy fighters appeared on her left flank, trying to circle around. She shifted, acquired, fired. 2 down. The third retreated. 18 rounds. Her radio crackled. Overwatch, we're approaching from the southeast. Don't shoot us. I wasn't planning on it. She took another shot, dropping a fighter who'd exposed himself to get a better angle. You're wasting time. I can handle this. Yeah, I saw you handle it. That's why I'm coming up. The voice was breathing hard, the strain of climbing at altitude. Where do you need us? Professional courtesy demanded she give them good information. And if she was honest with herself, she needed the help. 18 rounds for 30-plus targets was bad math, and her position was about to be compromised. 3 fire teams advancing from the southwest, approximately 270 meters, and closing. They'll reach effective range in 3 minutes. There's a rock formation at your 2 o'clock that'll give you good cover and overlapping fields of fire. Copy that. We'll intercept. The SEALs adjusted their course, moving toward the position she'd indicated. They were trusting her completely now, following directions from a voice on the radio, betting their lives that she knew what she was doing. Kira found herself hoping for the first time in 2 years that she wouldn't let them down. The first SEAL reached her position 90 seconds before the enemy. Garrett Shaw crested the ridge with his rifle ready, scanning for threats, and nearly stepped on her before his brain registered what he was seeing. A ghillie suit, a depression in the rock barely deep enough to hide a human body, a rifle barrel that seemed to grow from the earth itself. Friendly, she said sharply, not moving her weapon from its rest. Shaw froze, signaling his men to hold. For a long moment, he just stared. The shooter who'd saved 12 lives with impossible precision was a woman. Not tall, maybe 5'6" at most. Her face was partially visible through the ghillie suit's netting, showing eyes the color of winter storms and skin weathered by years in harsh environments. Staff Sergeant Kira Thornton, she said, still not moving. Ghost Sight Program. Captain Garrett Shaw, SEAL Team 7. He recovered his professional composure quickly, but she'd seen the flash of surprise. Most people were surprised. Never heard of Ghost Sight. That's the point. Behind him, these other 5 SEALs reached the position, spreading out into a defensive formation. Shaw noted how they moved disciplined, even after the chaos below. These were men who'd earned their place here. "We need to fall back," Kira said. "This position is about to get very hot." "We're not leaving you. I work alone." "Not anymore." Something moved in the rocks below, 200 meters. She swung her rifle smoothly, acquiring the target before Shaw could raise his own weapon. "That's a 400-meter shot with a carbine in mountain wind," she said flatly. "You'll give away our position, and we all die. Let me." She fired. The fighter dropped. 17 rounds. Shaw had worked with the best snipers in the military. He'd never seen anyone shoot with that kind of cold precision under pressure. It wasn't just skill. It was something else, something that came from years of practice and pain and probably things she'd never talk about. "Where'd you train?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Everywhere that mattered." Another shot, another target down, 16 rounds. Army Sniper School, SODIC, then 6 months at a place that doesn't officially exist. 3 years in the field before Ghost Sight recruited me. "And Ghost Sight sent you here alone to do what exactly?" "Observe," she paused, scanning for movement. "Report, don't engage, don't exist." "But you engaged." Her jaw tightened. The movement was almost invisible, but Shaw caught it. Something there, something painful. "I made a choice." More fighters were appearing now, drawn by the sound of gunfire converging on their position from multiple directions. The SEALs opened fire, their carbines cracking in controlled bursts, but the enemy had numbers and determination. And somewhere on the original timeline, 8 minutes would be up soon. The mortars would be operational. They needed to move. "Lieutenant Hale," Shaw radioed to the wadi below. "What's your status?" "Holding, sir, but we've got movement in the valley. Looks like reinforcements coming from the northeast. At least 20 additional fighters. 20 more, added to the 30 hunting them on the mountain, and the original force that had ambushed them." Shaw did the math and didn't like the answer. "Overwatch," he said, using the call sign she'd given herself. "Do you know another way out of here?" Kira was already thinking 3 steps ahead. Her mind raced through the terrain. She'd memorized the extraction routes. She'd identified the contingencies she'd planned for operations that had never happened. "There's a ravine," she said, 2 clicks northeast. "Locals call it the Serpent's Throat. Narrow enough that they can't flank us, rocky enough that vehicles can't follow. It leads to a plateau where a helicopter could land if command ever gets their act together. And if they cut us off, then we make our stand there." She met his eyes for the first time, and Shaw saw something in them that he recognized from his own mirror. The weight of command, the burden of decisions, the knowledge that some problems had no good solutions, only less bad ones. "It's our best option," she said. "Maybe our only one." Shaw nodded. Sometimes you had to trust the person who knew the ground. "Then you're with us," he said. "One as a ghost this time, as part of the team." Something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile, but something close. Something that looked almost like hope. "I should warn you, Captain Shaw, I'm not very good at working with others." "Yeah." Shaw stood, signaling his men to prepare for movement. "I'm getting that impression." They linked up with 2nd Squad in the Wadi 12 SEALs and 1 sniper who wasn't supposed to exist. The enemy was regrouping their assault, temporarily stalled by casualties they hadn't expected, but it wouldn't last. The radio chatter Kira could occasionally intercept told her they were calling for heavy weapons, for reinforcements, for patience. They had time, the enemy commanders were saying. The Americans had nowhere to go. Kira led the way toward the Serpent's Throat, moving through terrain she knew intimately and the SEALs had never seen. They trusted her completely now, following without question their lives in her hands. It should have felt like a burden. Instead, it felt like something else, like purpose, like meaning, like the first time in 2 years that she wasn't just surviving, but actually doing something that mattered. She thought of Bryce again, his final words, his belief that she could be more than the ghost she'd become. And she thought of Hawk Grayson, the grizzled master sergeant who'd trained her, who'd seen something in a young soldier that nobody else had noticed. "Skill doesn't make a great sniper," Hawk had told her once, his voice rough from decades of cigarettes and gunpowder. Knowing when to shoot makes a great sniper. Anyone can hit a target. Knowing which target matters, knowing when silence is worth more than a kill, knowing when to break the rules because the rules are wrong, that's what separates the legends from the statistics. She hadn't understood him then. She'd thought it was just old man philosophy, the kind of things senior NCOs said to fill time between practical lessons. She understood him now. The serpent's throat opened before them, a narrow gash in the mountainside that looked like a wound in the earth. The walls rose 30 feet on either side, jagged and impossible to climb under fire. The floor was rocky and treacherous, forcing single-file movement through most sections. It was a death trap if you defended from the wrong positions. It was salvation if you knew what you were doing. "This is it," Kira said, stopping at the entrance. "We set up here, they have to come straight at us. No flanking, no artillery, just them against us until extraction arrives." "And when does extraction arrive?" Lieutenant Hale asked. Good question. Kira checked her watch. Ghost Sight had certainly written her off by now. The SEALs command had to know something had gone wrong, but between the jamming and the weather, response time would be unpredictable. "Unknown," she admitted. "Could be 30 minutes, could be 3 hours. Can we hold for 3 hours? Kira looked at the 13 men around her, saw their wounds and their exhaustion and their dwindling ammunition. Saw something else too, something that mattered more than any of those limitations. Determination. These men wouldn't quit. Whatever came through that ravine, they would face it together, fight it together, die together if necessary. That was who they were. That was who she could be if she let herself. "We can hold," she said. She didn't know if it was true, but for the first time in 2 years, she believed it anyway. The first assault came 20 minutes later. They heard it before they saw it. Boots on rock, equipment rattling, voices coordinating and Dari calling out positions and assignments. Professional, organized, deadly. Then they appeared at the ravine entrance, moving in a wedge formation, cautious but confident. They'd learned respect for the sniper who'd killed so many of their comrades, but they still had numbers. Still had determination. Still had orders to leave no survivors. Captain Shaw let them penetrate deep into the ravine. 10 fighters, then 15, then 20. His thumb rested on the Claymore detonator. Kira watched through her scope from an elevated position on a rock ledge, tracking the enemy commander. Third from front left side, better gear than the others. He was the key. "Leader identified," she said quietly into her radio. "Third from front left side. On my shot." Shaw's voice came back steady. "Copy. All elements stand by." The enemy formation pushed deeper. 23 fighters now in the kill zone. Perfect. Kira's crosshairs settled on the commander's chest. 800 meters steep downward angle that would affect bullet trajectory. She compensated automatically, muscle memory and mathematics combining into instinct. 3, 2, 1, execute. Her rifle bucked. The commander dropped. Shaw detonated the claymores. The ravine exploded with thunder and steel. 700 steel balls traveling at 4,000 feet per second transformed the narrow passage into an abattoir. The enemy formation disintegrated, fighters thrown against rock walls, others simply ceasing to exist in the violence of the blast. But they were professionals. The survivors didn't panic. They returned fire, immediately filling the air with bullets that sparked off stone and screamed through the confined space. Shaw's SEALs answered with disciplined burst controlled fire that picked targets rather than wasting ammunition. Kira worked her rifle from above. Each shot eliminated a specific threat. The fighter setting up a machine gun went down. The one with the RPG never got a chance to aim. Someone trying to organize a retreat was stopped cold. 90 seconds of violence, then silence. "Cease fire," Shaw commanded. "Conserve ammunition." The smoke drifted through the ravine like fog. Somewhere below, wounded enemy fighters groaned, but those sounds were growing quieter. 17 down, Lieutenant Hale reported after a moment. Maybe 10 retreated. Ammunition status. The answers came back grim. Half of what they'd started with, maybe less. Another assault like that, and they'd be throwing rocks. Kira climbed down from her position, joining the others at the choke point. Her rifle was running low too. 12 rounds left. 12 rounds for whatever came next. "They'll be back," she said, meeting Shaw's eyes, "and they'll be smarter." He nodded, accepting the reality. "Then we'll be smarter too." Around them, the SEALs were already repositioning, preparing for the next wave. These men understood what was coming. They'd done the math the same way Shaw had. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of everything that kept soldiers alive. But they were still fighting. And somewhere above them, invisible in the gathering clouds, Kira thought she heard the distant beat of helicopter rotors. Maybe extraction, maybe hope, or maybe just the wind playing tricks on desperate minds. She checked her rifle, counted her remaining rounds, and took her position. Whatever was coming, she would face it, not as a ghost, as a soldier, as part of a team. For the first time in 2 years, that felt right. The voice came through the enemy radio frequency like a knife sliding between ribs. "Ghost sight, I knew you'd come out eventually." Kira froze. She'd been monitoring enemy communications since the first assault, listening for tactical information, troop movements, anything that could give them an edge. But this voice was different. This voice spoke perfect English, with a Boston accent. "I know it's you, Thornton. I recognize your pattern. 3 shots, displace, 4 shots, displace again. Hawk Grayson's signature technique. He taught you well." Her blood turned to ice. Nobody outside the program knew about Ghost Sight. Nobody outside a very small circle knew about Hawk's training methods. And absolutely nobody should know her name. "Who is this?" She kept her voice flat professional, even as her mind raced through possibilities. Each one was worse than the last. Laughter crackled through the static. Warm laughter like an old friend sharing a joke. "You don't remember me." "I'm hurt, Kira. Truly hurt. We worked together in Langley 2019, the Kandahar intelligence operation. You were the new Ghost Sight recruit, all eager and idealistic. I was the CIA liaison who thought you asked too many questions." The memory surfaced like a corpse rising from dark water. Victor Blackwood. Tall, charming, always perfectly dressed, even in a war zone. He'd been the CIA's golden boy, a paramilitary officer with connections that reached into every corner of the intelligence community. Everyone had loved Victor. Everyone had trusted Victor. Victor had died in a car bombing 3 years ago, except apparently he hadn't. "You're supposed to be dead," Kira said. "Death is such a flexible concept in our line of work. You should know that better than anyone, Ghost." His voice dropped, becoming almost intimate. "I've been watching you for months, you know, ever since I set up this little operation. I knew eventually someone from Ghost Sight would come sniffing around. I just had to be patient. Set the right bait, wait for the right ghost to appear." The SEAL team assault, the intelligence that promised light resistance. The ambush that had been too perfect, too well planned. "You leaked the mission intel," Kira said, the pieces falling into place with terrible clarity. "You set up the SEALs to draw me out. Not you specifically, any Ghost Sight operator would have done. But I have to admit, I'm pleased it was you. You were always the best of your class, the most promising, the most predictable. Predictable. You can't watch people die, Kira, it's your weakness. I saw it in Langley when you argued against operations that had acceptable casualty projections. I saw it in your file after your spotter died. You blamed yourself, didn't you? Blamed yourself for following orders instead of trusting your instincts." Her grip tightened on her rifle. "You don't know anything about me. I know everything about you. I know you've spent 2 years punishing yourself for Jackson's death. His name was Bryce. Whatever. The point is, I knew exactly what would make you break protocol. Put 12 American lives in danger, and Kira Thornton would reveal herself to save them. Guaranteed." Another laugh, colder this time. "And here you are, revealed, compromised, exactly where I need you to be." Captain Shaw had been listening on the shared frequency. His face had gone hard, the easy confidence replaced by something darker. "Who is this guy?" he asked quietly. Kira lowered the radio, meeting his eyes. "Victor Blackwood, former CIA paramilitary. He was declared dead 3 years ago, but apparently that was a cover. He's the one running this operation." CIA, Lieutenant Hale moved closer, his expression troubled. "What the hell is a CIA officer doing commanding a hostile force in Afghanistan? He's not CIA anymore. Kira searched out for the right word. "He's something else now, a traitor, a mercenary. I don't know exactly what he's become, but whatever it is, it's not on our side. Shaw absorbed this information with the calm of a man who'd seen enough betrayals to stop being surprised by them. So this whole thing was a trap, not just for us, for Ghost Sight, for anyone who might compromise his operation. Kira gestured toward the valley below, invisible now in the gathering darkness. Whatever he's running down there, it's big enough that he was willing to sacrifice 60 fighters just to flush out intelligence assets. And what could be worth that? I don't know, but I intend to find out. Blackwood's voice returned, cutting through their conversation. I can hear you strategizing, Kira. It's cute. But here's the thing you need to understand. I have time. I have resources. I have men who are very, very motivated to find you. All you have is a handful of SEALs and a rifle that's running low on ammunition. He paused, letting that sink in. The mortars will be operational in 18 minutes. Once they start falling, that cute little ravine of yours becomes a mass grave. So here's my offer. Walk out now, hands up, and I'll let the SEALs extract. I don't need them. I just need you and whatever intelligence you've gathered on my operation. And if I refuse, then everyone dies. Your choice, Kira, your conscience, your ghosts. The radio went silent. 12 faces turned toward her in the darkness, waiting for her response. Kira looked at each of them in turn. These men who'd climbed a mountain to save her. These men who'd trusted her with their lives despite knowing nothing about her. These men who would die with her if she made the wrong choice. He's lying, she said finally. Even if I surrender, he won't let you leave. You know too much. You've seen too much. He'll kill you all and blame it on the ambush. How do you know? Hale asked. Because that's what I would do in his position. She checked her rifle, counting rounds by touch in the darkness. Blackwood isn't just a traitor. He's a professional. He doesn't leave loose ends. Shaw nodded slowly. So we fight. We fight. Even if we can't win. Kira thought about that question. Really thought about it, turning it over in her mind like a stone worn smooth by water. My mentor used to say that the best sniper isn't the one who makes the most kills. It's the one who knows which targets matter. She met Shaw's eyes. Blackwood matters. Whatever he's building here, whatever network he's created, it needs to be stopped. Even if we can't stop it ourselves, we can hurt it. We can slow it down. We can make sure someone else gets the chance to finish what we started. That's a hell of a speech for a woman who claims she works alone. Maybe I'm learning. The ghost of a smile crossed Shaw's weathered face. Yeah, maybe you are. They spent the next 15 minutes preparing for the assault they knew was coming. The SEALs redistributed ammunition, consolidated positions, rigged the few remaining explosives for maximum effect. Kira climbed back to her elevated position, finding a crack in the rock face that would give her overlapping fields of fire on both the ravine and the surrounding terrain. 12 rounds left in her rifle, 10 shots between survival and silence. She thought about Hawk Grayson, the man who'd made her into what she was. 58 years old and still the deadliest shot she'd ever seen. He'd survived desert storms, survived 2 decades of operations that never made the history books, survived training generations of snipers who would carry his legacy into conflicts he'd never see. She remembered their last conversation before she'd shipped out for Ghost Sight. You're choosing isolation because you're afraid, Hawk had said, his voice rough with disappointment. Afraid of losing someone else. Afraid of caring enough to be hurt. I'm choosing to be effective, she'd argued. Solo operations mean no dependencies, no weaknesses, no one else to get killed because I made a mistake. The greatest snipers in history didn't work alone, Kira. They had spotters. They had teams. They had people who watched their backs so they could focus on the shot. He'd leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. Bryce didn't die because you trusted him. Bryce died because the system failed. You're punishing yourself for someone else's mistake. She hadn't believed him then. Crouched in the darkness with 10 rounds and 12 lives depending on her, she was starting to believe him now. The second assault came with darkness. The enemy had learned from their first attempt. Instead of charging directly into the kill zone, they used smoke grenades to obscure the ravine entrance. Instead of massing in a single formation, they advanced in small fire teams covering each other's movement, never presenting clustered targets. Thermal scopes would have cut through the smoke like butter, but the SEALs didn't have thermal scopes. They fired at shadows, at movement, at best guesses that sometimes paid off and sometimes didn't. Kira could see better from her elevated position, but not well enough. The smoke rose in columns thick and choking, turning the battlefield into an abstract painting of shapes and sounds. Contact left. I can't see them. Grenade. The explosion rocked the ravine shrapnel screaming off stone. Someone cried out in pain, a sound quickly stifled. Kira adjusted her position, searching for targets through the chaos. A figure emerged from the smoke rifle raised, and she put a round through his chest before he could fire. Another appeared behind him, and she dropped him too. 8 rounds. The enemy was pushing hard now, accepting casualties to gain ground. They'd reached the first bend in the ravine, a position that would give them cover for the final assault. "They're flanking!" Hale's voice crackled through the radio. "Southeast side climbing the wall?" Kira swung her rifle, searching for the climbers. Found them. 3 figures scaling the ravine wall with the confidence of experienced mountaineers. If they reached the top, they'd have shooting positions that overlooked the entire defensive line. She took the lead climber with a shot that dropped him 30 feet onto the rocks below. The second one flinched, losing his grip for just a moment, and she used that moment to put a round through his shoulder. 6 rounds. The third climber dove for cover, disappearing into a crevice she couldn't target from her position. He was still up there somewhere, still a threat, but she couldn't afford to wait for him to expose himself. "Shaw, you've got one climber still active on the southeast wall, approximately 40 feet up, hidden in a rock formation." "Copy. Hale, take Martinez and handle it." 2 SEALs peeled off from the main defense, moving to intercept the threat. Kira returned her attention to the ravine floor where the enemy assault was pressing closer. Through the thinning smoke, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A heavy machine gun. Russian-made belt-fed, capable of turning their defensive position into a slaughterhouse. 2 fighters were setting it up behind a boulder just inside the first bend, where they had cover from most angles. But not from hers. The distance was 600 meters steep, downward angle residuals, smoke affecting visibility. The gunner was partially concealed behind the weapon's shield, presenting only a sliver of target. She had to wait for him to rise to expose himself while adjusting the gun's position. Seconds stretched into eternities. The gunner rose. Kira fired. The bullet took him in the throat, dropping him across the weapon he'd never get to use. His partner scrambled for the gun, and she put her next round through his eye. 4 rounds left. The enemy assault faltered. With their heavy weapon neutralized and their climbing team eliminated, the momentum shifted. The SEALs pushed back with disciplined fire, driving the attackers toward the ravine entrance. 3 minutes of sustained combat, and then it was over. The second assault had failed, but it had cost them. 2 SEALs were wounded, one seriously. Ammunition was critically low. And somewhere out there, Victor Blackwood was recalculating his approach. Shaw climbed up to Kira's position, his face streaked with dirt and blood that probably wasn't his. 16 confirmed kills on the second wave, he reported. "We're down to maybe 8 magazines total for the team." Anderson took shrapnel in the leg. "He can still fight, but he can't move fast." "And the enemy?" "My best guess, they still have 30 to 40 fighters, plus whatever reinforcements Blackwood can call in." Kira absorbed the numbers. They weren't good. They weren't anywhere close to good. "The mortars," she said. "Blackwood said 18 minutes. That was 20 minutes ago." "I noticed." Shaw glanced toward the valley, invisible in the darkness. "Either he was bluffing or something's delayed them." "Blackwood doesn't bluff. Something else is happening." Her radio crackled. Blackwood's voice, but different now. The easy confidence was gone, replaced by something tighter, more focused. "Impressive, Kira. You've exceeded my projections. I estimated you'd be dead by now, but here you are still fighting." A pause. "I'm adjusting my timetable. The mortars will wait. I have a better idea." I'm breathless with anticipation. Sarcasm. How charming. His voice hardened. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm sending in my personal team. 12 men I trained myself, former Spetsnaz, former SAS, former operators from services you've never heard of. The best of the best, assembled specifically for situations like this." "Situations like what?" "Hunting ghosts." The radio went silent. Kira and Shaw exchanged glances. "Former Spetsnaz," Shaw said. "Former SAS. You believe that?" Blackwood had access to recruiting networks most people don't know exist. If he says he's assembled an elite team, he's probably telling the truth. "So we've been fighting the B team. The B team was supposed to be enough. We weren't supposed to make it this far. Shaw was quiet for a moment, processing. Then he asked the question that had been hanging between them since their first exchange of fire. Why are you here, Thornton, really here? Ghost sighted could have put anyone on this mountain. Why you? Kira considered deflecting, giving him the official answer about mission parameters and operational requirements. But they were probably going to die in this ravine, and dying men deserve truth. 2 years ago, I had a spotter, Bryce Callahan, best friend I ever had. We were on a reconnaissance mission when he identified a compromised route. He reported it to command, but they overruled his assessment, said the intelligence was solid. She paused, the memories sharp even now. The intelligence wasn't solid. We walked into an ambush. I killed 6 fighters, but not fast enough. Bryce took 5 rounds protecting me. He died in my arms. Shaw nodded slowly. He'd known men like Bryce, lost men like Bryce. After that, Kira continued, I requested transfer to Ghost Site, solo operations. No team to risk, no one to lose. She met his eyes. But today I heard 12 men about to die because someone ignored good intelligence again, because someone had decided the mission mattered more than the people. So you broke protocol. I couldn't watch it happen again. I couldn't be silent while people died. Shaw studied her face in the darkness, seeing something there that perhaps she wasn't even aware of. Your spotter, he said carefully, the mission where he died. Do you remember which command structure authorized the route? Task Force Vanguard. They were running operations in that sector. Something flickered across Shaw's expression. Something that looked almost like pain. I was Task Force Vanguard, he said quietly. 2 years ago, I was the operations officer. Kira went very still. What? I didn't make the call on your specific mission. That was above my level. But I was part of the structure. Or part of the system that, he stopped choosing his words carefully, part of the system that failed your spotter. The air between them became charged dangerous. Kira's hand moved toward her sidearm without conscious thought. You knew, she said, her voice flat. You knew what happened to Bryce. I read the after-action report. I didn't know the details, didn't know about Ghost Site or your involvement. But I knew a spotter died because command overruled field assessment. He didn't look away from her eyes. I've thought about that report every day since. Wondered if I could have done something different. Pushed harder against the decision. Demanded better intelligence protocols. And I don't know. That's the honest answer. I don't know if I could have changed anything, and I'll never know. All I know is that a good man died because the system prioritized mission over people, and I was part of that system. Kira's hand rested on her pistol grip, not drawing, not releasing. Her mind was a battlefield of conflicting impulses. This man was connected to Bryce's death. This man had climbed a mountain to save her. This man was being honest when he could have lied. Why are you telling me this? She asked finally. Because you deserve to know. And because if we die here tonight, I don't want to die with that secret between us. Shaw's voice was steady, accepting whatever came next. If you need someone to blame, I'm offering myself, but I'm asking you to wait until after we get out of this ravine. Kill me then, if you want. Just help me save my team first. The absurdity of it hit her. A man confessing his connection to her greatest tragedy while asking her to postpone revenge until after they survived an impossible situation. It was either the most honorable thing she'd ever heard or the most manipulative. Looking at Shaw's face, the weight of guilt that had clearly lived there for years, she decided it was the former. After this, she said, lowering her hand from the pistol, we're not finished talking. Fair enough. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unresolved tension. Then Blackwood's voice crackled through the radio, again shattering it. I hope you've said your goodbyes, Kira. My team is in position. They'll be coming from 3 directions simultaneously. No warning shots this time. No chances to surrender. Just 12 of the deadliest operators on the planet coming to do what 60 lesser men couldn't. You talk too much, Blackwood. Maybe, but I've earned the right. In about 10 minutes, you'll understand why. The radio went silent. Kira turned to Shaw. Get your men ready. This is going to be different from the last 2 assaults. Different how? Faster, smarter, more lethal. She checked her rifle one more time. 4 rounds. Blackwood isn't sending these men to capture the ravine. He's sending them to kill us. Every single one of us. No survivors, no witnesses. And you, what are you going to do? Kira looked at the terrain around them, the positions she'd memorized, the angles she'd calculated, the paths that might offer advantage to an enemy who knew what they were doing. I'm going to do what I do best, she said. I'm going to hunt. She slipped into the darkness, leaving Shaw to organize the defense. 4 rounds, 12 enemy operators. Impossible odds. But she'd been facing impossible odds since the moment she'd pulled that first trigger 8 hours ago. At least now she wasn't facing them alone. The enemy came like smoke through water. No noise, no warning. Just shadows that moved where shadows shouldn't move, shapes that emerged from darkness with weapons already rising. The first shot came from somewhere Kira couldn't see, a suppressed crack that dropped one of Shaw's perimeter guards before anyone could react. Then the ravine exploded with violence. These weren't the fighters from before. These were something else entirely. They moved with the fluid precision of men who'd spent decades perfecting the art of killing. They used terrain like it was an extension of their bodies. They coordinated without visible signals, anticipating each other's movements with the ease of long practice. And they were hunting her specifically. Kira knew this because 2 of them broke off from the main assault and began climbing toward her position. They'd identified her elevated perch somehow, maybe from the muzzle flashes of her earlier shots, maybe from satellite imagery, maybe from pure tactical intuition. It didn't matter how they knew. What mattered was that they were coming. She abandoned her position, moving laterally across the rock face, finding new cover behind a boulder cluster that gave her sightlines on the approaching climbers. One of them paused, scanning with night vision equipment that probably cost more than her annual salary. She aimed at the gap between his helmet and body armor. 3 rounds left. The shot took him in the neck. He dropped without a sound, tumbling down the cliff face. His partner reacted instantly, diving for cover, but Kira had anticipated the movement. Her second shot caught him in mid-dive, spinning him into the rocks. 2 rounds. But now they knew her new position. She could hear movement below, more operators repositioning to cut off her escape routes. The net was closing. Overwatch report. Shaw's voice was strained, the sounds of heavy combat audible behind him. 2 down, 10 remaining. I'm being flanked. Can you extract to our position? Kira assessed the terrain between her and the SEALs. Open ground. Multiple firing positions that would give the enemy clean shots. Suicide. Negative, I'd lead them right to you. Then what's your plan? Good question. She was down to 2 rounds, being hunted by 8 elite operators who knew approximately where she was, with no clear path to safety. The tactical part of her brain, the part that Hawk had trained to see patterns in chaos, was telling her the obvious truth. She wasn't going to survive this. But maybe she could take enough of them with her to give the SEALs a chance. I'm going to keep them busy, she said. Get your wounded ready to move. When you hear my last shot, run for the extraction point. Thornton, that's suicide. It's math, Captain. You have 12 men. I'm one. The equation is obvious. The hell with your equation. We came up this mountain to save you, and we're not leaving without you. You came up to save an asset. I'm no longer an asset. I'm a liability with 2 bullets and no exit strategy. You're not a liability. You're part of this team. The words hit her harder than she expected. Part of this team. When was the last time anyone had called her that? Shaw, listen to me. Blackwood wants me. He's been hunting me specifically since this started. If I'm dead, he has no reason to pursue you. He'll let you extract because eliminating you stops mattering. And if you're wrong, then you die 30 minutes later instead of dying right now, but at least it's a chance. Static on the radio, then Shaw's voice rough with emotion he was struggling to control. Hawk Grayson trained you. What? Your mentor, Warren Grayson, I know him, served with him briefly during Desert Storm. He's a legend. Kira didn't understand where this was going, and the enemy was getting closer. She didn't have time for reminiscence. What's your point, Captain? My point is that Hawk Grayson would never accept a student who gave up. He would never train someone who sacrificed themselves when there was still a fight to win. Shaw's voice hardened. So figure out how to win, Staff Sergeant. That's an order. The radio clicked off. Figure out how to win. Kira pressed herself against the rock, mind racing. 2 rounds, 8 enemies, impossible terrain, no support. But she'd been in impossible situations before. She'd survived them before. And Shaw was right about one thing: Hawk Grayson had never trained her to give up. She thought about the terrain she'd memorized over 6 months of reconnaissance. Every rock formation, every hidden path, every angle and elevation that most observers would never notice. And she remembered something. A path, a narrow channel cut through the cliff face by centuries of water erosion, invisible from below, barely wide enough for a human body. She discovered it during her 3rd month of surveillance, dismissed it as irrelevant to her reconnaissance mission. But it led somewhere. It led behind the enemy's position. If she could reach it, if she could move fast enough, if she could buy herself just 90 seconds of distraction. "Shaw," she said into the radio, "I need you to make noise. Lots of noise. Concentrated on the ravine floor. Give them something to focus on besides me." "For how long?" "90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes. "What are you going to do?" "Something stupid." She didn't wait for his response. Below, the SEALs opened up with everything they had, their fire concentrated in a wall of sound and fury that drew every eye, every weapon, every ounce of attention. Kira moved. She slid down from her position, using the darkness and the chaos to mask her movement. The erosion channel was 30 meters away, across exposed ground that would be suicide in normal circumstances. But the enemy was focused on the SEAL position, responding to the unexpected aggression with their own suppressive fire. 20 meters, 10. A shape moved in her peripheral vision. One of the operators who'd stayed alert, who'd anticipated that the attack might be a diversion. Kira didn't hesitate. Her rifle came up, and she fired the round, taking him center mass, dropping him before he could raise his weapon. One round left. She dove into the erosion channel, scraping skin from her arms as she squeezed through the narrow opening. Behind her, the surviving operator was already calling out, alerting his teammates to her movement. But she was in the channel now, and they didn't know about the channel. The passage was barely wider than her shoulders, twisting through the rock face like a snake's path. She moved by touch in the absolute darkness, her hands finding holds, her body contorting around obstacles she couldn't see. 60 seconds. The channel opened onto a ledge that overlooked the enemy's rear position. From here, she could see 5 of the remaining operators, their attention focused on the ravine floor, on the SEAL position that was drawing their fire. 5 targets, 1 bullet. The mathematics were still impossible. But mathematics weren't everything. Kira studied the terrain below the operators: supply caches, ammunition boxes, and they're partially hidden behind a rock formation, something that made her heart race. An RPG, loaded, probably brought for use against any vehicles that might respond to the SEALs' distress calls. If she could hit the warhead with her last round, the resulting explosion would catch at least 3 of the operators, maybe more. It was a 1 in 1,000 shot, a 50-meter target at a steep angle in near total darkness. The mathematics were brutal, but mathematics had never stopped her. She settled into position, controlling her breathing, finding the calm center that Hawk had taught her to access under any circumstances. The scope was useless in this darkness, so she went to iron sights, trusting muscle memory and instinct. The RPG warhead was a shadow among shadows, visible only because she knew exactly where to look. She exhaled halfway, held it, pulled the trigger. The world exploded. The RPG detonated with a thunderclap of fire and shrapnel, catching 4 operators in the blast radius. 3 went down immediately. The 4th stumbled, wounded, and was cut down by SEAL fire before he could recover. 4 operators remained, and Kira's rifle was empty. But she wasn't done. She dropped from the ledge, drawing her sidearm, a Glock 19 with 15 rounds. Not a sniper weapon, not her specialty, but right now it was what she had. The remaining operators were in chaos, their formation shattered by the unexpected attack from behind. Kira moved through them like a shadow, with teeth, her pistol barking in controlled pairs. 2 rounds, target down, 2 more, another down. The 3rd operator spun toward her, his reflexes impossibly fast, his weapon coming up even as hers was tracking. They fired simultaneously. His round caught her in the shoulder, spinning her against the rock face. Her rounds took him in the chest, then the head as he fell. 1 operator left. Kira's arm wouldn't respond. The bullet had torn through muscle and probably bone. Blood soaked her uniform, hot and urgent. Her pistol hung from nerveless fingers. The last operator emerged from cover weapon, raised a professional smile on his face. "Ghost sight," he said, his accent vaguely Eastern European. "I've heard stories. You're smaller than I expected. Kira couldn't raise her weapon, couldn't move her arm. The world was going gray at the edges, blood loss and shock combining to pull her toward unconsciousness. This was how it ended. Not in sacrifice, but in failure. One operator away from victory, and she couldn't finish it. The man raised his rifle. The shot came from behind him. He jerked a look of surprise crossing his face, then crumpled. Standing in the darkness behind him, rifle still raised, was Captain Garrett Shaw. "Told you, Kush," he said, moving toward her. "We don't leave our people behind." Through the haze of pain and blood loss, Kira saw something that made her stomach clench. A figure moving in the distance. Tall, confident, carrying a case that glinted in the moonlight. Blackwood. He was retreating toward a helicopter she could now hear approaching from the north. Not his elite team's extraction, his personal escape route. He had never intended to stay for the fight. He had been watching from a command position, letting his men die while he prepared to vanish. She tried to raise her pistol, but her arm would not respond. The world was spinning. "Blackwood," she managed to whisper. Running, north. Shaw spun, raising his rifle, but the distance was too great. The helicopter was already lifting off by the time he acquired the target. But Kira saw something else. In the flickering light of the burning debris, she spotted what Blackwood had left behind. A laptop crushed under fallen rocks from the RPG explosion. Its screen was cracked, its casing melted. The intelligence he had gathered. Destroyed. Not everything. He would have backups. Men like Blackwood always had backups. But she had heard him. That would have to be enough, for now. Kira tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. The gray was expanding, swallowing everything. Shaw caught her before she hit the ground. "Medic." His voice was distant, filtered through cotton. "I need a medic here now." She felt hands on her pressure on her wound, voices speaking in urgent tones she couldn't quite understand. "Stay with me, Thornton. You don't get to die after all that. You hear me? You don't get to die." The darkness reached for her. She let it come. The last thing she heard before consciousness faded was Shaw's voice calling for extraction, calling for support, calling for anyone who could hear him. This time, someone answered. Consciousness returned in fragments. First, the rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors, a sound that vibrated through her bones like a second heartbeat. Then the smell of antiseptic and blood sharp and clinical against the lingering scent of cordite. Finally, pain. A deep, throbbing agony that radiated from her shoulder and spread through her entire body like fire through dry brush. Kira opened her eyes. The interior of a Black Hawk medevac swam into focus. Medical equipment, IV bags swaying with the aircraft's movement. Faces she didn't recognize, leaning over her hands, working with urgent precision. And Shaw. He sat across from her, his face streaked with dirt and dried blood, his uniform torn in a dozen places. But he was alive. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Welcome back," he said. She tried to speak, but her throat was raw, probably from screaming she didn't remember. The medic pressed a water bottle to her lips, and she drank greedily. "The team," she managed finally. "How many of them?" "All 12, walking wounded mostly. Anderson's leg is bad, but he'll keep it." Shaw leaned forward. "You saved us, Thornton. That stunt with the RPG took out half their remaining force. We mopped up the rest." Blackwood, Shaw's expression, darkened. Unknown. He wasn't among the bodies. Either he retreated when things went south, or he was never in the field at all, commanding from a distance. So the snake had slithered away. Kira filed that information, stored it for later. Right now, she had more immediate concerns. "Ghost Site Command," she said. "They'll have tracked my transmissions. They know I broke protocol." "Yeah, about that." Shaw exchanged a glance with the medic, who suddenly became very interested in adjusting IV lines. "We had some communication with your people during extraction. They're not happy." Not happy was probably an understatement. Ghost site operators who compromised their cover didn't get second chances. They got erased. Not killed, nothing so dramatic. Just removed from records, separated from service, rendered invisible in a different way. Kira had known this when she pulled the trigger on that first shot. She'd accepted it, but accepting something in the abstract was different from facing it in reality. "How long until we reach base?" she asked. 40 minutes. There's a surgical team waiting." The medic looked up from his work. "You're lucky, Staff Sergeant. The bullet missed the bone by about 2 millimeters. Clean through the muscle. You'll have full function after physical therapy." Lucky. That was one word for it. Kira closed her eyes, letting the helicopter's vibration carry her towards something like rest. She wasn't unconscious, not quite, but she floated in that gray space between waking and sleeping, where thoughts moved slowly and pain felt distant. She thought about Bryce, about the promise she'd made over his body, about the 12 men who were alive because she'd kept that promise. She thought about Shaw's confession, Task Force Vanguard, the system that had failed her spotter, the man who'd climbed a mountain to save her despite being part of that system. Forgiveness wasn't simple. It wasn't a switch you could flip, a decision you could make once and never revisit. It was a process, a journey, a choice you had to keep making every day. She wasn't there yet, but she was closer than she'd been. The helicopter banked, beginning its approach to the forward operating base. Kira opened her eyes and watched the mountains fall away below them. The Hindu Kush, ancient and indifferent, holding its secrets and its dead with equal silence. Somewhere down there, Victor Blackwood was regrouping, planning, preparing for whatever came next. And somewhere in those same mountains, 60 fighters lay dead because they had underestimated a ghost. Kira smiled despite the pain. Let Blackwood run, let him hide, let him think he'd escaped. Ghosts were patient, and this ghost wasn't finished yet. The surgery took 4 hours. Kira spent most of it unconscious, which was probably for the best. When she woke in the recovery ward, her shoulder was immobilized in a complex brace, her arms suspended at an angle that felt unnatural but was apparently optimal for healing. She had visitors. Shaw came first, cleaned up, now his wounds treated, looking almost human again. He brought coffee that tasted like motor oil and news that tasted worse. Ghost Sight officially terminated your contract, he said, settling into the chair beside her bed. Effective immediately. You're no longer part of the program. Kira had expected this. It still hurt. What about my record? Am I being discharged? That's where it gets interesting. Shaw sipped his terrible coffee. Someone intervened, made some calls to people who have the authority to make other people listen. Your record shows an honorable separation from Ghost Site transfer to General Special Operations assignment, pending recovery and reassignment. Who intervened? Shaw smiled. I have a phone call for you. Wasn't sure if you'd be up for it, but given the circumstances. He handed her a satellite phone. The number on the screen was blocked, untraceable, the kind of line that officially didn't exist. Kira answered, You stupid, reckless, magnificent girl. The voice was rough-weathered by decades of cigarettes and gunpowder, a voice she knew better than her own father's. Hawk, 14 hours in position, solo recon, and you decide to take on 60 hostiles with 40 rounds. Warren Grayson's laugh was warm despite the criticism. That's either the bravest thing I've ever heard or the dumbest. I'm still deciding which. How did you... I have friends who tell me things. Friends who called me about 6 hours ago saying one of my former students had gone completely off the rails and needed someone to vouch for her before the bureaucrats buried her. His voice softened. They showed me the after-action report, Kira. What you did up there, that was something else. I broke protocol. I compromised a 6-month intelligence operation. You saved 12 lives, 12 American operators who would be dead right now if you'd followed your orders like a good little ghost. Hawk's tone hardened. I didn't train you to follow orders, Kira. I trained you to make decisions. There's a difference. She felt tears threatening, which was ridiculous. She hadn't cried since Bryce's funeral, and she wasn't about to start now. But Hawk's words hit something deep, something she'd buried under 2 years of isolation and self-punishment. Bryce would be proud of what you did up there, Hawk continued. I know you've been carrying that weight since he died, blaming yourself for following orders instead of trusting your instincts. But what happened to Bryce wasn't your fault. It was a system failure, a command failure. You were a soldier doing what soldiers are supposed to do. I should have listened to him. He knew the route was wrong. Maybe. And maybe if you'd spoken up, command would have overruled you both and sent you in anyway. Or maybe they'd have listened and you'd both be alive. We can't know, Kira. We can never know. All we can do is learn and move forward. A pause. You've been punishing yourself for 2 years. Isn't that enough? The tears came despite her best efforts. Silent tears that tracked down her cheeks and soaked into the hospital pillow. I don't know how to stop, she whispered. You start by accepting that you deserve to live, that you deserve to be part of something bigger than yourself, that the best way to honor Bryce isn't to become a ghost, but to become the operator he always knew you could be. Hawk's voice carried the weight of decades of wisdom earned through blood and sacrifice. Ghost Sight is done with you, Kira, but there are other programs, other teams, other ways to serve that don't require you to be invisible. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you heal up, get your strength back, and then come talk to me. I've got some people who want to meet you, people who value operators, who know when to break the rules for the right reasons. He chuckled. Shaw's people, actually. He called me before the extraction even landed, said he had a sniper he wanted to recruit and needed my blessing. Kira glanced at Shaw, who had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. You called my mentor before you called command priorities, Shaw said simply. We'll talk more when you're recovered, Hawk said. For now, rest, heal, and stop being so damn hard on yourself. That's an order from your commanding officer. You're not my commanding officer anymore. I'll always be your commanding officer, Thornton. That's how this works. His voice warmed. I'm proud of you, kid. Really proud. Grayson out. The line went dead. Kira handed the phone back to Shaw, wiping her eyes with her good hand. You called him, she said. Before you knew if I'd survived surgery, you called my old trainer and asked him to intervene on my behalf. You saved my team, all 12 of us. The least I could do was make sure you had somewhere to land when Ghost Sight cut you loose. Shaw leaned back in his chair. Besides, I meant what I said in that ravine. You're part of this team now, whether you want to be or not. I work alone. You did work alone, past tense. He smiled. How's that working out for you? Kira looked at the brace on her shoulder, the IV lines running into her arm, the hospital bed that would be her home for the next several days. Could be better, she admitted. Could be worse too. Could be 12 body bags heading home to families who'd never understand why their sons and husbands and fathers died in a valley that doesn't appear on any official map. Shaw stood. Get some rest, Thornton. We'll talk more when you're out of here. He left her alone with her thoughts, which was probably a mistake. Alone was when the ghost came. Not Ghost Sight, but the real ghosts. The memories of Bryce bleeding out in her arms. The faces of the men she'd killed today. The sound of bullets and explosions and screaming that still echoed in her ears. She'd taken lives today. A lot of lives. More than she'd ever taken in a single engagement. Each one necessary, each one justified. But each one still a weight on her soul. The medic had called her lucky. Hawk had called her magnificent. Shaw had called her part of the team. She didn't feel like any of those things. She felt tired. Bone-deep tired, the kind that sleep couldn't fix. The kind that came from years of carrying burdens alone, years of punishing herself for sins that weren't really hers. Maybe Hawk was right. Maybe it was time to stop. Maybe it was time to let someone else help carry the weight. She closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her under. This time she didn't dream of Bryce dying. She dreamed of him smiling. 3 weeks later, Kira stood on a beach in Virginia watching SEAL Team 7 run morning PT. Her shoulder was still healing, still immobilized in a brace that would come off in another week if physical therapy went well. She couldn't run with them, couldn't train with them, couldn't do much of anything except watch and wait and wonder if this was really where she belonged. The morning sun painted the Atlantic in shades of gold and copper. The air smelled of salt and possibility. In the distance, the SEALs moved in formation, their cadence calls carrying across the sand like a heartbeat. She'd been out of the hospital for a week. Ghost Sight had processed her separation with cold efficiency, her files already disappearing into the classified archives where failed operators went to be forgotten. Her personal effects had been shipped to a storage facility in Texas. Her apartment in the anonymous suburban complex where Ghost Sight housed its operators had been reassigned to someone else. Kira Thornton, for all practical purposes, no longer existed. And for the first time in 2 years, that felt like freedom instead of death. Footsteps behind her. Heavy, deliberate, familiar. You came. She turned. Garrett Shaw stood in PT gear, breathing hard from the run he'd apparently cut short. Behind him, the rest of the team continued their formation, Hale's voice carrying the cadence in Shaw's absence. You asked me to. Asking and expecting are different things. He moved to stand beside her, looking out at the ocean. I wasn't sure you'd show. I wasn't sure either until about an hour ago. What changed your mind? Kira considered the question. It deserved an honest answer. I've spent 2 years trying to disappear, trying to become invisible, untouchable, unreachable. I thought if I didn't let anyone close, I couldn't lose anyone else. I couldn't fail anyone else. She watched the waves roll in endless and patient. But that's not living. That's just dying slowly. Shaw nodded. Hawk said something similar. When I called him about you. What did he say exactly? He said you'd spent 2 years running from the best parts of yourself. Said you had more potential than anyone he'd ever trained, but you'd buried it under guilt and fear. Shaw paused. He also said if I let you slip away without trying to recruit you, he'd personally come down here and kick my ass. Despite everything, Kira smiled. That sounded like Hawk. He called you, by the way, Shaw continued. Said he's flying in tomorrow. Wants to see you. Wants to talk about your future. My future. You've got one, you know, despite everything you've done to avoid it. He reached into his pocket and produced a folder slightly crumpled from the run. This is the transfer packet. SEAL Sniper Support Program. You'd be attached to Team 7 as a precision marksman and Overwatch specialist. Not a SEAL yourself, obviously, that's a different pipeline, but working alongside us. Part of the team. Kira took the folder but didn't open it. Why, she asked. You could recruit any sniper in the military. Better ones, probably. Ones without my baggage. Could I? Shaw turned to face her fully. Could I find another sniper who'd take on 60 hostiles to save strangers? Who'd break every rule in the book because the rules were wrong? Who'd sacrifice her entire career for people she'd never met? That wasn't sacrifice, that was stubbornness. Same thing sometimes. He smiled. I've been doing this job for 15 years, Thornton. I've worked with the best operators in the world, but I've never seen anyone make the choices you made on that mountain. The tactical decisions were impressive, sure. But more than that, you chose to risk everything for people you had no obligation to help. That's not training. That's character. Or stupidity. Sometimes there's not much difference. The team was finishing their run now, gathering in formation near the water's edge. 12 men who'd climbed a mountain to save her. 12 men who'd watched her take impossible shots under impossible pressure. 12 men who knew what she was capable of and wanted her anyway. I have conditions, she said. Shaw's eyebrows rose. Already, I keep my rifle. My personal weapon customized to my specifications. Non-negotiable. Done. I choose my own positions in the field. I know terrain better than most people know their own faces. If I say a position is wrong, people listen. Done. And if I call a threat, if I identify a target or a danger that others don't see, the team takes it seriously. No more overruling field assessment because command thinks they know better. Shaw's expression shifted slightly. He understood what she was really asking. Not just for professional respect, but for a promise that what happened to Bryce would never happen to anyone she worked with again. Done, he said quietly. All of it, done. Kira opened the folder. Transfer request forms, medical clearance documents, security authorization paperwork. All the bureaucratic machinery that would transform her from ghost to soldier, from invisible to visible, from alone to part of something larger. And there clipped to the inside cover something that made her breath catch. A photograph. It showed her and Bryce taken during their last deployment together. They were sitting on a supply crate somewhere in Afghanistan sharing a meal from MRE packets, laughing at some joke she couldn't remember anymore. Bryce's arm was around her shoulder, casual and comfortable, the easy affection of partners who trusted each other completely. Where did you get this? She asked, her voice barely steady. Hawk sent it, said you'd need reminding of what you're fighting for. Shaw's voice was gentle. He also sent this. He held out his hand. In his palm lay a dog tag worn smooth by years of handling. The name stamped into the metal was barely legible, but she knew what it said without looking. Bryce Callahan. How? Hawk recovered it from your personal effects after the funeral. Said he'd been holding on to it, waiting for the right moment to return it. Shaw pressed the dog tag into her hand. He said to tell you that Bryce would want you to have it. That Bryce would want you to remember what you shared, not just how it ended. Kira's fingers closed around the metal still warm from Shaw's hand. The weight of it was almost nothing. The weight of what it represented was almost unbearable. I can't, she whispered. I can't just... You can. Shaw's voice was firm but kind. You don't have to forget him. You don't have to stop grieving. But you can carry him with you into what comes next instead of letting him keep you trapped in what came before. The team had finished their formation and was dispersing across the beach. Some headed for the water, cooling off after the run. Others collapsed on the sand, breathing hard. A few were watching Kira and Shaw, curiosity evident in their expressions. These men had risked their lives for her. Had climbed a mountain under fire because they believed she was worth saving. Had called her one of their own before she'd even agreed to join them. That meant something. It had to mean something. If I do this, she said slowly, there's no going back, no more disappearing, no more being invisible. Would you want to really, she thought about the question, really thought about it the way she'd thought about whether to pull that first trigger 3 weeks ago. Being a ghost had kept her safe. It had protected her from connection, from loss, from the pain of caring about people who might die. But it had also trapped her in a prison of her own, making a solitary confinement where the only company was her guilt and her ghosts. Bryce hadn't died so she could become invisible. Bryce had died doing what he loved, protecting someone he cared about, serving a cause he believed in. The best way to honor him wasn't to hide from life, it was to live it. Kira pulled the pen from the folder and signed her name on the transfer request. Her handwriting was shaky, affected by her injured shoulder and the emotions she was struggling to control, but the signature was clear, legible, unmistakable. Kira Thornton. No longer a ghost, Shaw grinned. Welcome to Team 7, Staff Sergeant. Don't welcome me yet. I might be terrible at this. You won't be. He took the folder from her, tucking it safely into his waistband. Come on, let me introduce you to the rest of the team. Officially this time. They walked toward the gathered SEALs. The men straightened as they approached, their curiosity replaced by something more respectful. They'd seen the after-action reports. They knew what she'd done on that mountain. Hale stepped forward first, extending his hand. Staff Sergeant Thornton, it's an honor. Lieutenant Hale, she shook his hand firmly, ignoring the twinge in her shoulder. I seem to remember you questioning Captain Shaw's decision to climb up after me. I question the tactics, not the objective. Hale smiled. For what it's worth, I was wrong. Completely and totally wrong. First time for everything. The other SEALs laughed, the tension breaking. One by one, they stepped forward to introduce themselves, to shake her hand, to welcome her into their ranks. These were men she'd watched through a scope, men she'd protected from impossible angles, men whose lives she'd valued more than her own career. Now they were her teammates, her family, her reason for being visible again. When the introductions were done, Shaw called for attention. Listen up. Staff Sergeant Thornton is joining us as our precision marksman specialist. She'll be training with us when her shoulder heals, deploying with us when she's cleared, and watching our backs the way she watched them 3 weeks ago. He looked at Kira. Anything you want to add? She thought for a moment. I've spent 2 years working alone, convincing myself that isolation was safer, that caring about people was a weakness. She met their eyes one by one. You taught me I was wrong, all of you. When you climbed that mountain to save someone you'd never met, you showed me what a team really means. I'm not going to forget that, and I'm not going to let you down. Silence. Then Hale spoke. So about that tradition, new team member buys the first round of drinks. That's not a tradition, Shaw said. You made that up. It's absolutely a tradition. Has been for at least 3 weeks now. The team erupted in argument, good-natured bickering about traditions and protocols and who owed whom from various past missions. Kira found herself laughing, actually laughing, the sound strange in her own ears after so long. Shaw moved to stand beside her, watching his team with obvious affection. You're going to fit in fine, he said. You think so? I know so. He nodded toward the water where some of the men were already heading for a post-PT swim. Come on, let me show you around the base. Get you oriented. They walked together across the sand, leaving footprints that the tide would eventually erase. But unlike her years as a ghost, Kira didn't mind leaving traces now. Traces meant you existed. Traces meant you mattered. Traces meant you were alive. Behind them, the sun continued its climb into the Virginia sky. Ahead of them, an uncertain future full of missions and dangers and choices she couldn't yet imagine. but also full of possibilities, of connection, of purpose, of team. At the edge of the beach where sand gave way to the parking lot of the naval base, an older man waited beside a rental car. He was in his late 50s, his hair gone silver, his posture still parade ground straight despite his years. His face was weathered by decades of sun and wind and gunpowder, but his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. Warren Hawk Grayson watched his former student approach with an expression that mixed pride and relief in something that might have been love. Hawk. Kira stopped a few feet away, suddenly uncertain. I thought you weren't coming until tomorrow. Changed my flight. Couldn't wait. He closed the distance between them, pulling her into a careful hug that avoided her injured shoulder. You scared the hell out of me, kid. You know that I scared myself. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. He released her, holding her at arm's length to study her face. You look different. Less haunted. I feel different. That's the first step. His gaze shifted to Shaw, standing respectfully to the side. Captain, thank you for looking after her. She did most of the looking after herself, sir. I just provided extraction. Modest, I like that. Hawk returned his attention to Kira. I hear you've decided to join Team 7. News travels fast. News about you travels fast. You made quite an impression on certain people in certain offices. His expression grew serious. There's something else you should know, something that couldn't wait for official channels. Kira felt a chill despite the warm morning air. What? Hawk reached into the car and produced a folder. Standard government issue, the kind that held classified briefings and mission parameters and secrets that never saw daylight. Blackwood is alive. We confirmed it this morning. She'd known this on some level. Shaw had told her Blackwood's body wasn't among the dead. But hearing it confirmed officially made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Where unknown, he disappeared from the AO within hours of your extraction. But here's the thing. Hawk opened this folder revealing satellite imagery and intelligence reports. He didn't just run, he took something with him. A laptop containing the names and operational details of every CIA asset in the Middle East. We thought it was destroyed when you hit the RPG cache, but apparently he had a backup. So he's still a threat. More than a threat. He's a catastrophe waiting to happen. If he sells that information or uses it himself, dozens of agents could be compromised. Hundreds of operations could be blown. The entire intelligence network we've spent 20 years building could collapse. Kira studied the satellite images. They showed a compound somewhere mountainous with vehicles and personnel and all the hallmarks of an organized operation. Where is this northern Mexico, near the border? We think he's established a new base there, possibly working with cartel elements who have their own reasons to want American intelligence assets exposed. Hawk's jaw tightened. The official agencies are working through diplomatic channels, trying to get authorization for an operation. But diplomatic channels take time, and Blackwood isn't going to wait. What are you suggesting? Hawk exchanged a glance with Shaw. Ghost Sight is done with you, Hawk said carefully. But there are other programs, less official ones. Programs that could use someone with your skills and your flexibility regarding rules. You want me to go after Blackwood? I want you to finish what you started. He closed the folder. Not alone, not as a ghost. With Team 7 if Shaw agrees. A joint operation sanctioned but deniable to eliminate a threat that the regular channels can't touch. Shaw stepped forward. We've already discussed it. The team is on board. But it has to be your choice, Thornton. After everything you've been through, nobody would blame you for walking away. Kira looked at the folder in Hawk's hands. At the satellite images showing Blackwood's new compound. At the face of the man who'd orchestrated the deaths of dozens of fighters, who tried to kill 12 SEALs just to flush out a ghost who'd betrayed everything he'd once sworn to protect. She thought about Bryce and the promise she'd made over to his body. She thought about the 12 men who'd climbed a mountain to save her. She thought about what it meant to be visible again, to have a team, to have a purpose that extended beyond mere survival. When do we leave? She asked. Hawk smiled. It was the smile of a teacher watching a student finally understand the lesson. Not yet. You need to heal first. Train with your new team. Learn to work together instead of alone. He handed her the folder. But when you're ready, the mission will be waiting. Blackwood thinks he's escaped. Thinks he's safe. Thinks the ghost he flushed out of hiding is no longer a threat. He's wrong. He is, and when the time comes, you're going to show him exactly how wrong. Kira took the folder feeling its weight like a promise. This wasn't the ending she'd imagined 3 weeks ago when she'd pulled that first trigger and accepted that her career was over. This was something else, something new, something that felt for the first time in years like a beginning. She looked at Shaw at Hawk at the beach, where her new team was still laughing and arguing and being alive in all the ways that mattered. She looked at the white tag around her neck, Bryce Callahan's name pressed against her heart. "I'm ready," she said. And for the first time since Bryce died, she meant it. The sun climbed higher over Virginia Beach. The waves rolled in patient and eternal. And somewhere in the distance, a ghost who'd chosen to become visible again started planning for the battles yet to come. Not alone. Not invisible. Not anymore. She was Kira Thornton, Staff Sergeant, SEAL Team 7 marksman, survivor of impossible odds and keeper of impossible promises. And she was just getting